On the rugged coast of Maine, where the Atlantic roars and churns, waves of white foam crash against jagged cliffs like the sharp blades of time, Thomas Harrow, a 52-year-old widower, lived a life of hardship but profound purpose. His weathered wooden house, faded by sea salt and biting winds, perched precariously on a cliff overlooking Penobscot Bay, where the water shimmered like a shattered mirror under the morning sun. Each dawn, as the horizon glowed golden, seagulls soared, their plaintive cries blending with the relentless crash of waves, creating an eternal symphony of the sea. The winds carried the briny breath of the ocean, sweeping through sparse fields of wild grass on the cliffs, where the scent of salt mingled with damp earth and dried grass. This was Thomas's world, a world both harsh and comforting, where he found meaning in his solitary days after losing his beloved wife, Ellen, to complications during the birth of their son, James, 31 years ago. Ellen's death left a void in Thomas that nothing could fill, except his fierce love for James. He raised the boy alone in the small wooden house with its moss-covered shingles and windows that rattled in the sea winds. Each day Thomas set out on his boat, the Ellen, named for his late wife. The small vessel, its blue paint peeling, bore witness to his years of struggle with the sea. He hauled heavy lobster traps from the ocean depths, his calloused hands bloodied by ropes and nets, his back bent under the weight of his labor. In the early mornings, when fog blanketed the bay, he stood on the deck, his breath mingling with the frigid air, his eyes fixed on the horizon where sea and sky merged. On stormy days, with waves rising like small mountains, he battled gusts of wind, salt water stinging his face, but he never gave up. Each lobster trap pulled from the sea was a promise, a better future for James. Thomas was more than a fisherman. To provide for his son, he took on work at the docks, unloading cargo under scorching sun or freezing rain. In winter, he waded into icy mudflats to dig for clams, each swing of the shovel a grimace against the cold, seeping through his tattered boots. His rough, scarred hands told the story of his years of sacrifice. He saved every penny to buy books for James, to ensure he had new clothes each winter, and occasionally a small treat like a trip to the county fair, where James's radiant smile on the Ferris wheel, his eyes sparkling with joy, was etched into Thomas's heart. But the sea was unforgiving. When James was 10, an accident changed everything. On a stormy day, the slick deck of the Ellen betrayed Thomas as he hauled a lobster trap. His foot caught in a rope, and the fall shattered his ankle. The injury never healed properly, leaving him with a limp and a cane during the long winters, when the sea winds howled through the cracks of the wooden house. Yet Thomas never complained. He continued to fish, continued to work, each painful step a reminder of his duty to James. His love for his son was a fire that burned through pain and exhaustion, a light guiding him through the darkest nights. James grew into a handsome, broad-shouldered man with the striking blue eyes of his mother. He left their small village to attend college in Portland, then stayed to work in finance. Thomas was proud, though the distance between them grew. James spoke of city life, stock markets, and networking parties Thomas couldn't comprehend. James's calls became infrequent, and when he did call, it was often to ask for money, for rent, a new car, or things he deemed necessary to build his image in the city. Thomas, though living frugally, always sent the money, believing it was how he helped his son get ahead. When James, now 31, announced he was marrying Abigail, a lawyer from a wealthy family, Thomas's heart swelled with joy. He imagined walking his son down the aisle, perhaps even dancing a slow dance with the bride despite his limp. But a week before the wedding, James called. His voice was curt, anxious. "Dad, it's better if you don't come to the wedding. It's complicated. Abigail's family, they're particular. You can watch the live stream. I'll send the link." Thomas's chest tightened as if crushed. He asked why, his voice steady though his heart was breaking. James hesitated, then said, "It'll just be easier. I've hired someone to play my dad, to keep up appearances." That night, Thomas sat alone in the wooden house, the flickering oil lamp casting shadows on the worn walls. Outside, the sea roared, waves crashing against the cliffs as if to swallow the world. James's words cut deeper than any storm. James was ashamed of his father's limp, his threadbare clothes, his simple life as a fisherman. Thomas had sacrificed everything, years of bloodied hands, nights going hungry so James could eat, days working to exhaustion for his son's future. Yet James had hired a stranger to play his father. Thomas decided he would not watch the live stream. He would not send the $50,000 he'd saved for a wedding gift. He packed away his hopes and turned his back on the ceremony. In Portland, James's plans unraveled. Without Thomas's money, the lavish wedding he'd promised Abigail's family, a grand affair at a seaside mansion with crystal chandeliers, imported champagne, and a live band, fell apart. James scrambled, cutting costs, but the venue demanded payment up front. Frustrated, he called Thomas, his voice sharp with entitlement. "Can't you help me out this time, Dad? You're embarrassing me." Thomas listened, his heart heavy, then hung up. He had no words left. Sarah, James's cousin, a strong-willed woman who always cherished Thomas, overheard the exchange at a family gathering. She knew how James had distanced himself from Thomas, mocking his rustic lifestyle to impress Abigail's family. Outraged by James's ingratitude, Sarah took to social media, posting a long, heartfelt account of Thomas's sacrifices, his years of grueling labor, the injury that left him limping, his unwavering love for his son. She exposed James's plan to hire a stand-in father, tagging Abigail and her family. The post went viral, shared thousands of times, catching the attention of the local and broader community. Fishermen, neighbors, and friends who knew Thomas expressed outrage at James's actions. Local newspapers picked up the story, turning it into a lesson on gratitude and sacrifice. Abigail, horrified by James's deceit and disrespect, called off the wedding. Her family, who valued integrity over appearances, supported her decision. James was left alone, his carefully crafted image shattered. His job in Portland faltered as colleagues and clients turned away, unwilling to associate with someone so lacking in character. James, once proud of his success, now faced isolation and the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, Thomas made a bold decision. He sold the wooden house, the Ellen, and everything tied to the life he'd known. The sea had been his home, but also a painful reminder of loss, of Ellen, of James, of the years he gave to someone who didn't value him. With the money, he left Maine for a village nestled in the rolling hills of the Yorkshire Dales in England. The landscape was a vivid contrast to Maine's stormy coast. Lush green meadows stretched endlessly, dotted with ancient stone walls that wove through the hills like stitches on a vast tapestry of nature. In the early mornings, mist blanketed the valleys, shimmering under the first rays of sunlight. The air carried the scent of heather, fresh grass, and damp earth, a gentle change from the briny sting of the sea. In the village of Hawes, Thomas didn't just rent, but bought a small stone cottage nestled beneath the emerald slopes of Wensleydale. The house, with its gray stone walls covered in moss and a warm, red-tiled roof, had a small garden out back, where Thomas planted daisies, lavender, and climbing roses that bloomed vibrantly in summer. From the living room window, he could see rolling hills where sheep grazed leisurely, the soft jingle of their bells filling the peaceful air. Each morning, he stepped outside, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the gentle breeze caress his face. The dales, with their winding paths through wildflower meadows and sparkling streams, brought him a peace he'd never known in Maine. Thomas took a job at a small bookstore in the village center, where wooden shelves held hundreds of novels, histories, and poetry collections. The work was gentle, arranging books, chatting with customers, and suited his limping leg. The cobbled streets of Hawes didn't pain him like the slick decks of his boat, and the villagers, with their warm smiles and simple greetings, made him feel at home. He began joining community events, weekly farmers' markets where he bought fragrant Wensleydale cheese and homemade jams, or evenings at the village pub where he sipped bitter ale and listened to stories of the region's history. One spring morning, while tending his garden, pruning roses and planting mint, Thomas met Clara, a 48-year-old widow living in a stone cottage nearby. Clara had kind brown eyes that sparkled like sunlight on a stream, and a smile that melted the coldest days. She had lost her husband to cancer 10 years earlier and raised her daughter, Emily, now 26, alone. Emily was married and lived in a nearby village with her husband and 2 young children. Clara and Thomas bonded quickly over stories of loss and sacrifice. They sat together on a wooden bench in the garden, sipping hot tea, sharing tales of raising children, of life's joys and pains. In the afternoons, they walked the winding paths, wildflowers blooming brightly on either side, the hills stretching out like an invitation to explore. Once, they paused by a stream, its waters gurgling over smooth stones, and Clara took Thomas's hand, speaking of her simple dream, a peaceful life, with someone she loved. Clara saw Thomas for who he was, a quietly strong man, his heart once broken, but still full of kindness. Thomas found in Clara a warmth he'd long forgotten, a connection that didn't demand he sacrifice himself. Emily, Clara's daughter, welcomed Thomas like a second father. She invited him to family dinners, where her children climbed onto his lap, giggling as he told stories of his days at sea, of waves as high as mountains and star-filled nights on Penobscot Bay. Those evenings in Emily's cozy home, with the fire crackling and the smell of fresh-baked bread, Thomas felt the meaning of family, not as a provider, but as someone loved and valued for himself. Years passed, and Thomas never heard from James. He didn't seek him out, and the pain of his son's betrayal faded, like waves receding from the shore. In the dales, amid the green hills and Clara's love, Thomas found redemption. Each spring, their garden bloomed, roses climbing the fence, apple trees bearing fruit. Each summer, they hosted picnics on the hills, where Emily and her family brought baskets of bread, cheese, and homemade wine. In autumn, as golden leaves carpeted the paths, Thomas and Clara walked hand in hand, pausing to watch sunsets paint the horizon red. In winter, they sat by the fire, weaving stories of the past with dreams of the future. Thomas and Clara's stone cottage became the heart of their happiness. They hosted small gatherings, inviting neighbors and Emily's family, where laughter echoed and candlelight flickered. Thomas, once a lonely fisherman battling the sea, was now part of a community, a man who found joy in simple things: a hot cup of tea, a kiss from Clara, a hug from Emily's children. The sea had shaped him with its fierce waves and grueling days, but the hills of the Yorkshire Dales healed him, offering a new beginning. One winter evening, as snow fell softly outside, blanketing the hills in pristine white, Thomas and Clara sat on the wooden bench in their living room, hands clasped tightly. The fire crackled, the scent of burning wood mingling with the cinnamon of Clara's freshly baked cake. "Do you ever miss the sea?" she asked, her voice soft as a spring breeze. Thomas smiled, his gaze drifting to the window, where snowflakes glimmered in the moonlight. "Not anymore," he said, squeezing her hand. "This is home." Thomas's life was now complete, not because he had everything, but because he had what truly mattered: a warm home, a woman who loved him for who he was, and a family that embraced him with open hearts. The years of hardship on Maine's stormy coast, where waves crashed and winds howled, were now distant memories. In the Yorkshire Dales, amid the gentle hills and Clara's enduring love, Thomas found happiness, a happiness simple, profound, and forever.